As long as you're thinking equal to your environment, you keep creating the same life. Change is to think greater than your environment, to think greater than the circumstances in your life, to think greater than the conditions in your world. In every great person in history knew this, whether it was Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the Wright brothers, Joan of Arc. Who we really are isn't a body living in this environment. You know, an identity in the environment, identifying with the people we know and the things we do, and living in linear time. That's not who we are. We're not materialists. We are actually pure consciousness, living in a body or using a body to express ourselves. So if you think about it then most people spend the majority of their life using their senses to determine reality. They're materialists. And when we live in that state, really, the hindbrain, the primitive brain, is actually in control. We're reacting to everything in our life. Now, the creative state is the antithesis. When you're in a true state of creation, this amazing thing happens. You forget about yourself. You become selfless. You become nobody. You become no thing. You become no time. And when you do that properly, where you begin to speculate a new possibility, and you begin to invent a new way of being, or you begin to create something in your mind, the forebrain turns on, the crowning achievement of the human being, and it begins to lower the volume to time and space, so that the only thing that's real in that moment is a thought. And when that happens, the brain captures the thought as the experience, then upscales the hardware to install the neurological circuits and change the brain ahead of the actual event. And in that moment where we move from survival to creation, and we forget about our normal cell, the hormonal centers turn off, and the energy moves right up into the heart, and you begin to fall in love with the moment. You begin to get in the present, and you begin to forget about the future in the past, and you're in that present moment. That's what I call the natural state of being. Can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the event has already occurred? The latest research in neuroscience says you can change your brain from living in the past to living in the future. And can you fall in love with that vision to such a degree that you come out of your resting state and change guilt or suffering into inspiration and joy and gratitude to such a degree that your body, as the unconscious mind, does not know the difference between that external event and what you're creating internally, so that your body believes it's living in that future, in the present moment. And you begin to signal new genes in new ways to change your body to look like the event has already occurred. The latest research in epigenetics says you can change your body by thought alone. Now reason this with me. If there's physical evidence in your brain and body to look like the event has already occurred, your brain and body are no longer living in the past. They're living in the future. And you will walk right into your vision. Now, most people in this audience, all of you, have done something great in your life. You woke up one day, or you had a wild thought out of nowhere, and that thought was a possibility in the future, something new you wanted to experience. And the moment you started thinking about this experience, the moment you started contemplating this potential reality, you turned on a part of your brain called the frontal lobe, the crowning achievement of the human being. It's 40% of your entire brain. It is the creative center, and it has connections to all other parts of the brain. And the moment you said, what would it be like to be a leader? What would it be like to be successful? What would it be like to have this vision come true? The moment you asked that open-ended question, you turned on this part of the brain, because the rest of the brain is just a bunch of automatic programs. And now the frontal lobe, the creative center, wakes up, and it has connections to the entire brain. It's the CEO, It's the boss. It's the symphony leader of the brain. And the moment you get creative, the frontal lobe begins to select different networks of neurons that are stored in your brain from things you've learned or experienced. And as you begin to think a what-if question, it begins to select these different networks and begins to seamlessly piece them together and making your brain fire in new sequences and in new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you are changing your mind, because mind is the brain in action. Mind is the brain at work. And the moment those neurons fire in tandem, you get a picture in your mind, a hologram, a vision, an abstraction. And for those people who are passionate, that thought that they're thinking begins to create an elevated emotion. They become inspired. They feel enthusiastic, entheos, filled with God. They become passionate. They start to open their hearts. And all of a sudden, they're combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion. And it's the combination of a clear intention and an elevated emotion, in our research over and over again, that proves that the person now is changing, fundamentally changing, biologically changing, internally. And their brain and body are moving from living in the past into living in the future. When you do that, when you had that moment, you came out of your resting state, and then you started to write down all the things you were going to do to get to that vision, all the choices you were going to make, all of the experiences or goals you wanted to achieve, and all of the emotions and the joy you would feel. And when you were doing that, you were setting your sights towards that destiny. And then you did something really brilliant. You wrote down the choices you weren't going to make. He became aware of the behaviors you weren't going to demonstrate. You began to review certain experiences you wanted to stay away from. And then you looked at the emotions that would bring you to a lower level. And you begin to separate the old self from the new self. And when you begin to do that, and you're observing the old self, it means you're no longer the program. Now you're the consciousness observing the program. And that's when you begin to objectify your subjective self. Now, reason this. Let's say you've had some pretty rough experiences in your past, and those experiences cause you to feel sad and unworthy and guilty and judgmental. And you've gotten so used to feeling guilty and unworthy and judgmental that still feels normal to you. And then, because you feel kind of victimized, then you blame people, and you complain, and you make excuses, and you feel sorry for yourself. And that's your personality. All of a sudden you say, today, I'm not going to do that any longer, because that's the old self. And then you start off your day, and it goes really well for about 2 hours. And then, all of a sudden, the moment you realize that you're no longer making the same choices as the day before, you are going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. It's going to be uncertain. There's going to be some unpredictability. And we now know that people would rather hold on to their guilt and unworthiness than to step into the unknown, because at least they can feel something. And so the moment you stop making the same choices that you always make, get ready, because it's going to be uncomfortable. And that's the moment you're heading towards the new self, and we call it stepping into the river of change. Well, it's kind of interesting, because in order for us to have some type of change in our bodies, change something in our environment, or move into a new line of time, we have to forget about our present body, our present environment, and our little, concept of time. We have to become that pure consciousness. And, You can't walk through the door to the quantum field. This is somebody you have to walk through the doors. And nobody. Now consciousness is awareness, and awareness is noticing and paying attention. In that invisible field of intelligence, albeit spirit, the quantum field, the universal mind, whatever you want to call it, is both personal and universal. It's within you and all around you. We can demystify it. It's that same intelligence that's keeping your heart beating right now. 8 liters of blood per minute. 400 liters of blood per hour, 100,000 times in one day through 100,000 miles, 100,000 kilometers of blood. Vessels. Nobody's paying attention that something's giving us life, that we make 10 million cells every second, because we lose 10 million cells every second that we in one cell of your body. It goes through the order of 100,000 chemical reactions per second. Now multiply that by the 70 trillion or 100 trillion cells that make up your body. There's an intelligence that's giving us life, and most people never take the time to begin to interact with that consciousness, begin to give it a plan or a template, or begin to have its show cause in their life, because they're too distracted by all the emotional conditions in their environment that reaffirm those addictions that keep them distracted from that inner journey. So, if you don't have your vision clear in your mind by the end of this week, all of this information is philosophy, it's theory, it's intellectual data that's stored in your thinking brain. But there'll be a certain percentage of people in this room that will apply this information, that will personalize it, that will demonstrate it. And those people who learn the information and store it in their brain and can repeat it, those people who start thinking about what they're going to do with it, as they begin to think about what they're going to do with it, they begin to install the neurological hardware in their brain, priming them to a new future. And when you take all of this information and you say, how am I going to apply it to my life? And you get your behaviors to match your intentions, you get your actions equal to your thoughts. You've listened to great leaders. You've gotten specific information about success. You understand what it is. But most emotional intelligences and how it is to change a culture, and you start applying it to your life. If you're able to do it, you are going to have a new experience, and that new experience is going to enrich the circuits in your brain. Because that's what experience does. And then you're going to feel like a leader. You are going to feel successful. You are going to feel clear. And the moment you feel that feeling now, you are teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. We could say that knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. And in that moment, you are embodying leadership, your own body, and success. You're embodying clarity. Why? Because the emotion is the experience in chemical form. And the moment you feel that emotion, you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. You are embodying knowledge, but now here's where the expert comes in. If you've done that experience once, you have to be able to repeat it. And great people in the world who are uncompromising, they keep working to reproduce the experience. And if you can reproduce that experience over and over again neurologically and chemically, you will condition your body to become the mind of it.